Policy Committee, this is the second meeting of the municipal year, I think, isn't it?
It is.
So welcome everyone again. The meeting today is open to the public, and the report of agenda item number 15 is not available for public or press due to it containing exempt information. The meeting will be webcast and recorded, will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website, and it is also possible that Sheffield Live TV may record and broadcast this meeting. We have received no public questions or statements. Please can I request that all mobile phones and such devices are turned on to silent as to not disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today, so if there is a fire alarm, that will mean we need to do an emergency evacuation. Please follow members of council staff out of the building, and we meet in Tudor Square is the meeting point. If I could just now ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, and I'll go this way. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. Thank you. I'm Councillor Richard Williams, and I represent the Stannington Ward.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name's Gail Smith, and I represent the Mosborough Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Anne Wishaker, and I'm from West Ecclesfield Ward, and I'm Lib Dem Group spokesperson on this committee.
I'm Toby Mallinson, Hillsborough Ward, and Deputy Chair.
I'm Mia Drazik from Park and Arbourthorne Ward.
Hi, Councillor Nico Bishara, Netherridge and Sharrow Ward.
Hello, Councillor Rob Bannister from Grace Park Ward.
Hello, Meredith Teasdale, Strategic Director for Children's.
Hello, I'm Robert Parkin, Assistant Director for Legal Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rachel Marshall, Principal Democratic Services Officer today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Councillor Dondale, Chair of this committee, and Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside. I do have one apology from Councillor Malachi Habe. Thank you very much. As I said before, we have got an exclusion of one item, which is item number 15, which we will take at the end of the meeting. Do we have any declarations of interest on today's agenda items? No? Okay, thank you. Can we take a look at the minutes from the previous meeting, which are on page 11 of your agenda pack? If we just go through those on page 1, page 2, page 3, I'm assuming you've all read them, page 4, page 5. Any minutes or matters arising from the agenda, from the minutes from the last meeting? No? So do we agree that they're a true record? From those of you that are here, thank you. Okay. As I said before, we've got no petitions or questions or statements, and we've got no members' questions. At this point, I would like to bring agenda item number 16 up the agenda, which is the agenda item, which is our budget item. No, she's going first. Okay. Yep, and then we'll do work programme after. So yeah, do you want to come forward and bring your paper? If I can ask you to find your name on the table, pop it up, and then when you finish speaking, take it down again and explain who you are when you speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and thank you for accommodating the agenda change today. The paper sets out the Council's current financial position at the end of Q1 25-26 and the actions that are underway to manage the pressures. It's the same report that was presented to the Finance and Performance Committee on the 18th of August and is being shared with each policy committee this month to ensure transparency, strengthen governance and to enable accountable decision-making across all service areas. At Q1, the Council is forecasting a year-end overspend of £28.2 million, driven primarily by persistent demand pressures in adults and children's social care, SEN transport and homelessness, alongside pressures in the dedicated schools grant and housing repairs and maintenance. To partially offset this, £22.8 million of corporate mitigations have been released into the outturn position, which includes £7.9 million of housing benefit subsidy loss provision, 5.1 million for high cost placement growth, and 9.8 million from the 24-25 collection fund surplus. The Council has launched a series of service-level programmes and corporate financial measures to reduce the overspend. These include adult social care efficiency reforms that are led by the Chief Executive through the Adult Social Care Improvement Board. In housing, there's reducing temporary accommodation costs by minimising bed and breakfast placements and accelerating permanent housing transitions. In children's services and SEN transport alone accounts for 6.8 million of the overspend, with over 1,200 students currently transported by taxi. Key actions include daily stand-up meetings to reduce single occupancy routes, an expansion of personal travel budgets with nearly 100 families now participating. The independent travel training, there's been 12 travel trainers recruited under the Freedom to Travel Skills for Life project to support young people in travelling independently. Taxi and minibus optimisation, transitioning more children to shared transport, especially those with reduced school hours, in collaboration with schools and parents. In children's services, the 8.1 million overspend is mainly due to placements and support for children with disabilities. Key pressures and responses include there's been a rise in care entrants, including complex cases, making placements more difficult, particularly for older children, and recruitment of additional foster carers, and plans to bring children back into city-based placements as new homes are opened. There is a regular review and negotiation of high-cost placements to manage provider costs while maintaining stability, and a panel being established to review direct payments for children with disabilities, aiming to improve oversight and efficiency. The actions that are in place are already yielding results and will be continued to be reflected in future forecasts. Corporately, in response to the overall position, the Council's introduced some organisation-wide spend controls. So there's been a 6-month recruitment restriction, which is expected to save 6 million with a further 3 million from vacancy factor budgeting, and some discretionary spend restrictions with some centralised monitoring and clear exemption criteria in place. The measures are coordinated across governance forums, including the Future Sheffield Board, Performance and Delivery Board, and the Budget Improvement Group, which ensure strategic alignment and accountability. It is important to recognise that these pressures are not unique to Sheffield. The complexity of children's needs has increased nationally, particularly post-COVID. We are engaging with national government on consultations on funding reform and welcome the government's commitment to a 3-year local government finance settlement from 26-27. Having confirmation of funding from government 3 years will allow us to plan our budgets and setting strategy with greater confidence compared to the current situation where we receive confirmation of each year's funding in December before the financial year begins. In summary, while the position is challenging, the Council is responding with urgency and focus, and sharing this update with each policy committee makes sure that we maintain transparency, strengthen governance and enable that accountable decision making across all service areas. I'm happy to take any questions from colleagues from Children's Services are also here today to provide any further detail on any of those recovery actions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Smith.
Tell me, I didn't quite, sorry, I do apologise. I didn't quite catch the amount of young people who've done the travel training in the last 12 months. Can you just recap and tell me how many that would be?
So I have a number in my head, but I'm not absolutely convinced it's the right number in my head. I'm happy to get a briefing out to you. What we're wanting to do is increase that. We're currently out to recruit additional travel trainers, and more than happy for us to bring a more detailed paper to a future committee as well, or to a briefing if that would be helpful. Yeah, we've got 6 current independent travel trainers, and we're going up to 18. But what you're asking is how many people have been travel trained in that period of time.
It don't matter if it, I don't need an exact figure. I just wanted to know if it were 20, 30, 10, 15.
I think it's a relatively small number each time. So intense work is undertaken over the year. So in my mind, I want to say 5 or 6 sort of per travel trainer in a term. But I'll get you the absolute detailed information from Mark Shake.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Sorry, Chair, it's miles away. Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? The need to reduce the cost of transport has actually led, probably unintended consequence, to a very positive focus on independent travel. I mean, I know from my experience as a school governor, these vulnerable children can learn, probably not the right expression, or adopt independent travel, it's a game changer for them. I mean, it absolutely changes their lives, and it's really good. My only slight concern is that I hope that the priority is the welfare of the children, and that the need to reduce transport costs doesn't override that. It's a rhetorical question, but can I be assured that that's the situation?
You can absolutely be assured of that. My first job in my role is to ensure that children are safeguarded. So we absolutely make sure that the independent travel training is, that staff are appropriately checked, that we've got the right risk assessments in place, and we're working with schools and colleges around that independent travel training and with parents as well.
I think as lead member, I'd like to reassure you that we will be challenging at every step of the way and asking for feedback. And the reassurance that we did give at the previous meeting when we were looking at this is that children who could travel independently will be the children that are targeted. We are very mindful that there will always be children that will never be able to do that. So there will be, you know, and the conversations will be with parents, they'll be with young people, they'll be with all of the support staff around them, and hopefully we'll be able to get more young people more independent, but not necessarily the ones that will never be able to be. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mallington and then Councillor Bannister.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as a parent myself who's benefited from travel training for my son, I can corroborate how useful it was, how essential it was really to give us as parents the confidence to allow greater independence. And it is something that's really important part of growing up, and you know, as children get older. Obviously, you're absolutely right, Councillor Dale, about the you know, there are youngsters who you know, it needs to be absolutely keyed in with what youngsters are capable of doing, and with parents and the youngsters themselves. I was very pleased in briefings when it was outlined that this is going to be very much embedded in the EHCP annual review process. So that as part of that process, youngsters and their parents will be having to discuss, you know, can your child get more independence? You know, this is everyone's benefit for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, just kind of echoing, I guess, with the travel training. I'd like to ask the 12 that we are recruiting, how far down the line are we with that? Have we recruited them yet? Are we into the training process? Or are we still looking for the right people? Because I mean, obviously I'm very, very happy that we're looking for the right people. We can't just have people. It's a very, very high trust area, so we need to have the right people. And the only other thing I'd say is that obviously we are in an overspend situation, but we are not really, are we? We're in an underfunded situation as usual. And adults being way more over than children's are, we need to get further downstream as always. We need to get more people trained and happy and safe, and that way the pressure can be taken off adults, and hopefully we can get our budgets back under control while making the city a better place.
Thank you, Councillor Bannister. Meredith?
So note to self, always make sure that Mark Shake is in the building when you need him. I'm currently on a quick call. So in answer to your question, Councillor Smith, so 20 young people completed training last year, and there are 15 currently in training. That was based on 3.5 travel trainers, and we are currently recruiting the further 12 now. So that will obviously increase the number of children quite sizably who will be able to undertake that independent travel training, and that we are currently holding interviews now. This is all straight from Mark Shake's mouth.
Thank you. Mark, if you're watching, we miss you. How dare you not be here. Thanks for that, Meredith. Any more questions or comments on this? Councillor Whittaker.
Just a quick one. Have we actually got any figures of who we think in terms of how many children would benefit by travel training? So how many are on our list, if you like, to try travel training?
So I can't give you an exact number because I would be making it up in my head, but we will get that for you. But it was part of that calculation in the papers that we brought when we were talking about personal transport budgets. I suppose that changes all the time anyway, doesn't it? So I think we're talking about 200, 250, 300 children, but I'll double check that. But that conversation with the college, with shift training, with our special schools, with our mainstream schools is a constant conversation which we are looking to get much better at. So we do it really well with shift training and with the college. We do it pretty well with our special schools, but need to be better at that. And that all links back to the EHCP process and our relationships, which Councillor Mallinson has referred to. We know that wasn't good enough in our SEND inspection. We knew that before our SEND inspection. So this is an opportunity to reset that. So we're having those conversations at the earliest opportunity so that we're building in from an early stage that importance of that freedom to travel. So it doesn't come as a shock and it's not an afterthought in the sense of we know we've got 200, 300 children who we could travel train. It's actually part of that evolution of the relationship parents have with their children as they become more independent, the conversation with schools, so that we're really personalising that approach rather than it being a large number of children. But I will make sure I have that number, and I might have the next time I answer a question.
I think a lot of the problem is it's with parents and not the young person. I mean, I spoke to someone this morning whose daughter has a lot of issues after college and is desperate to have travel training and to do independent travel. And at the moment, her mother's kind of stopping her, and so we have this long conversation about, you know, you need to let her do that. You need to, you know, you'd be surprised what she can do and how it will affect her life. And I think that's what we need, parents on side, don't we, to do that, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. I think for anyone who was in the room at the last meeting when we did have some parents in who are parents of children who have accessed independent travel training, I think the parental anxiety for any parent who's got children, we say this quite often, don't we, any child who's got special educational needs, parent anxiety is really high because they've had to battle for everything. And I think this is for us about, we have to look at the bottom line. This is public money and we have to make sure we're spending it effectively, but first and foremost, this is about best outcomes for children and young people. And having spoken to some parents have said, well, this has actually liberated me, because I've been a driver for 18 years and now I can go out and do things and I feel like a bit of a loose end. And I think the further down the road and the more we embed this and this becomes the norm, when we start, like Meredith suggested, we start having these conversations at EHCP in Y5, Y6, you're going on to secondary school, have you thought about, I'm not suggesting at that point that's when we do independent travel training, but it might be that you're not quite ready in year 7, you're not quite ready in year 8, but by year 9 you might be ready. It's that kind of independent, individual catered approach. So numbers, we know we've got a big number at the moment, but I imagine it will just be a system that will kind of reduce the cost at the other end, if that kind of makes sense. Thank you, everyone. Councillor Bashram.
Yeah, just adding on to that, again, going back on the last meeting where we had the opportunity to listen to some of the parents and what you mentioned, Dawn, you know, hearing the experience and, you know, the anxiety and not being aware what is involved, but how our process, thank you to yourself and all the team of travel trainers, that that process was shared and explained, which I found very impactful and quite approachable and very understanding and sensitive, and I think that really helped. And going back is involving, which I'm sure from that experience what we had last meeting, that is already happening, engaging the parents, understanding that, you know, the difficulties they've faced in getting where they are in terms of supporting their young people. But I think I was quite pleased to hear that we're already doing that, you know, involving the parents and the carers and the wider support system of that child in order to get them on board to be able to give this confidence of travelling. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Basher. And if I can just come in on the children's budget recovery actions, if that's all right, just for, I mean, we get briefed quite often on what we're doing in this area, but I think looking at, if members of the public were looking at this and we're looking at the additional measures, including scrutinising high-cost care packages, I think it's just looking for the reassurance about the decision-making process. And I know, and I'm confident, that the decision-making process is based on safeguarding and it's based on the right place for the right child at the right time. But I just think we just need reassurance that decisions are not going to be made on placements or not going to be made around budget alone. And I know they're not, but I just think for parents or parents of children that are in these settings might feel a wee bit anxious about that. And if we could probably at a future meeting have a bit of a briefing or a paper on the feasibility stuff around our in-house residentials, because I know that work is ongoing, and I think it would be really nice for all members and new members to know where we're at in that process. Thank you.
I can absolutely give you assurance that a decision about whether a child comes into statutory social care at whatever stage, and most importantly when a child is brought into the care of the local authority, is a decision based on the needs of that child, what is happening in their life, and the impact and the risks that surround that child. And we would only take a child into care where we were satisfied that there was no other way that that child could remain within their family or in their extended family, in their community. That's really important. So we challenge ourselves really hard around that and make sure that there is the right questions being asked right the way through the process. Separately, we also know that we are overspending on the level of placements. We have seen a slight increase in the number of children coming into care. We understand that, we know that, we've actually seen it go down over the last month again. But any correlation, there is a correlation, a direct correlation between the number of children in care and the cost on the budget. And in addition to that, and you won't be surprised, those of you who've been in committee for some time, to know that there is profiteering in our system, and that profiteering cost has increased over the last couple of months. So if anything, we should be making sure that we're lobbying that there are not we are not funding private funds from our most vulnerable children, and that in itself, it also has a knock-on consequence of our budget. We work really hard at that, so I can give you assurance that we are one of the authorities which has the highest percentage of children that are placed in kinship care. When a child comes into care, the best outcomes for a child are that they remain with their family. It also is one of the more cost-effective for the council. After that is fostering. We're working hard around ensuring that we're supporting our foster carers, we're increasing our foster carers, we're keeping our foster carers and keeping them as Sheffield foster carers. We then have independent fostering associations which we also use. We also, and I think you know this, have really strengthened our children's homes within Sheffield City Council. We've improved the quality of those homes. We're now at a point where we're making sure that we are ensuring that our children are within those homes. So we have had some periods where we haven't been fully occupied in those homes, but we need to make sure it's the right mix of children, that children get on, that they do feel that it's their children's home, so we do that in a measured and sensible way. And then finally, and for some children it is right, we need external placements. We work really hard at that. Amy, who's in the room, and others within children's social care work really hard at getting the right cost for our children, really understanding what is being provided for those children and the impact it will have, and we review those placements regularly, because what we want to see is that there is improvement in what's happening for that child, and we're always looking at reunifying those children back into Sheffield and hopefully back with their families. But the cost, and I'll say again, I do think it is one of the issues we have in our system, that a small number of private companies are profiteering from our most vulnerable children.
Thank you, Meredith. Any questions or comments on that item? No? Thank you very much then, Jane, for coming today. We now move on back on to agenda item number 7, which is the work programme on page 19, and Rachel will be presenting. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So, as Chair has said, the work programme is outlined from page 19. That's the cover report with a set of recommendations laid out on page 20 that we'll be asking you to agree today. On page 22, if you leave to there is a table with some amendments which will highlight new and moved items. You'll see that that's actually quite full, that table. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, but that does highlight things, obviously, that have been moved and added since the last meeting. On page 25, Appendix 1 is laid out, which shows all the agenda items for forthcoming meetings for the rest of this municipal year. Obviously, that is subject to change. I'd like to highlight that this is a fluid document. It's open for discussion with yourselves and amongst yourselves to add to that work programme and put recommendations forward. But that's what you see in front of you is as it stands now. So I will pass back to Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I think some of us might need this in bigger print. I don't know about you lot. Yeah, I think we might just, in future, might need that a bit. It's easier if you do it on screen, but I think when it's printed, it is really difficult to read, isn't it? Yeah. I think I just have two. I will come back to members to see if they want anything adding on to or moving around on the work programme, but I've got 2 items that need adding to the work programme. And that is the recommissioning of the Fresh Start service and the recommissioning of the befriending service. Would you like me just to pass you that so that you can add it in?
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you. Members, do you have any items that you think are missing at the current moment on the agenda? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still relatively new to this committee, and my question really is there a priority in these tasks? And, are there some that you think we must just absolutely have to achieve? Others, drift is not necessarily the right word, but aren't quite as important as others? Or is it all, these are just the priorities for this committee for this year? Because the workload seems
Quite a lot.
massive. And how are they prioritising? So,
I mean, Meredith can come in, but I mean, for anyone new to the agenda, we've got 9 areas of transformation work we're currently working on. We've got the budget that we need to be mindful of. We've got the performance framework that we're working on. So it's all really, really important. And it is, you're right, it is difficult, but I think Meredith might want to just talk us through that one.
So there is a huge amount going on in the world of children. So we have coming through from national government is Families First, which is about how we respond to changes for the way that we undertake our statutory social care work, and most importantly, how we ensure that we have the right early help approach and early intervention. Now, we have real strength in that in Sheffield, but we need to do more and need to go further, and that is something which we think, committee, you need to be aware of, because it is something that's national but will have a sizable change. We've also got the Send Improvement Board. The inaugural meeting is on Friday. That's driving the changes around education, health care plans, neurodiversity, communication, exclusion from school, speech language communication, video fluoroscopy and CAMS. So again, within this paper you have some of those sections which will be coming through to you. We've also got sufficiency of school places, because actually if we don't have that space and that breadth for schools to have space to include and ensure children are belonging, then we have issues around that. So that's within the work programme. We also have a number of commissioned activities which we need you to be part of and signed off. We have the Youth Justice Service, which is part of our service. We have a separate board which drives that work. We have an inspection and there is a plan which we have to update on an annual basis which comes. So some of these papers are annual papers which come to you, so including the Children's Safeguarding Partnership paper as a sign-off. So I suppose it does feel overwhelming at times, Councillor Williams. It does feel a lot of work. I think that the officers who work in this area across the partnership are working really hard and are really committed to improving outcomes for children. We know we've got a lot more to do in that space, and I think that's why the agendas are so full, because we think it's really important you have visibility and also can challenge us and make sure that we are doing what we say we're doing, and we're really wanting transparency. I think that's possibly been one of the accusations that we've had, is that we're not transparent, and I suppose we are trying to make sure we are absolutely clear about what we're doing, and that we are humble in accepting the challenge that we should have to do the very best for our children. So it is quite a lot on the agenda, so I apologise.
I was about to say that, Richard, please don't apologise. I think for anyone thinking coming on Children's Committee, we're going to be like, this committee is not for the weak. It's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of work, and we do appreciate the support that we get as members as well from officers on this. Councillor Mallington.
Thank you, yes, and I very much appreciate the huge amount of work that does go on behind the scenes. I just want to look at, it'd be useful if, Meredith, if you could talk through the 3 items that haven't got a date yet at the bottom of page 27, because I consider they're all important. In particular, transitions is really important to adulthood, which we just touched on in homeschool transport. The all-age autism strategy came out in 2023. I've not heard anything about that. It had some great ideas, but I'm very worried that it's not actually happening. But maybe I'm wrong. And then early years provision. You know, we've had recent issues with nurseries and stuff, and so that would be useful. They're all very important. Yeah.
So all of those will have a timescale in for the next meeting. So both transitions and all-age autism strategy are currently held in adult committee. And so some of the conversations with my adult social care colleagues have been, let's get your CQC over and done with, and let's make sure that we've got the right conversations taking place. What I have arranged is that there will be a briefing around neurodiversity and the work that we're doing around neurodiversity, and that will come to a committee later in the year along with the SEND improvement plan, but we'll do a briefing around neurodiversity in particular. I think around the early years provision, there is work taking place currently about how we're bringing together that early years team and that best start approach. So again, we're looking at that probably for after Christmas, but before the end of the municipal year. We are working on it and more than happy to share through the briefing sessions an update of where we're up to, but formally bringing it into the public arena, doing that after Christmas, but we'll make sure that those dates are in place. But as I say, the first 2, it's about a bit of dancing with adults committee about how we're bringing that in and making sure that children's are represented in the right way within that. But the work is taking place, I suppose, is the other thing, is just to assure you in all 3 of the areas, work is taking place.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can we just check? We used to have somebody from Children's over working with adults, a member actually, used to be on the all-age disability board. It was one of your colleagues actually, Toby, who used to be chair with me way back when, so that we could feed back, you know, what we're happening over there. So I don't know if we can still do that, if we've gone beyond that point now. I'm not quite sure.
If you leave that with me and I'll have a look. Certainly, we're looking at James Booker, who's one of our children's leads for neurodiversity, being on the all-age autism strategy board. So, but I'll take that away.
That's great. There was something else, but it's gone now. But thank you. Any more questions or comments on work programme? No? Thank you very much. So now we move on to agenda item number 8, which is Meredith, this is you. This is your Strategic Director's Update Report. Thank you. It's on page 29.
Great, thank you.
Oops, I know what I wanted to say,
Oh.
sorry. Okay, it's just for, Meredith, you referred to in briefings, just for members of the public and people that are watching that think that this is the only time that members actually get together to discuss things in children's. It's not. We have weekly briefings as a trio, and then we have regular briefings with all members. So there is that political involvement in policy development. So just for members, we don't just sit here and get it presented. We are quite aware of what's happening.
Great. Councillor Whittaker, so the answer to the question is that we expect between 200 and 250 young people in the year to be trained with the full complement of travel trainers, so my figures weren't far off. Right, okay, so this paper is really the update that I give regularly to committee. Obviously, at the last meeting, we had that we were just in the moment where the inspection report was being published. We have had conversations around that. There is a Send Improvement Board, which at the first meeting of that is on Friday. It is led by an independent chair who is Edwina Grant, who has got a strong track record in turning around and improving, particularly around SEND, but across children's. She has been a DCS, a Director of Children's Services, in a number of places, and has been off the Director of Children's Services work for probably about 10 years, but is a real driver and is seen as a really strong independent chair by both the Department for Education and NHSE. That meeting will also include DFE and NHSE, who will be monitoring our progress. We have had confirmation which will be signed off on Friday, that our improvement plan has been agreed by DFE and NHSE, and once we have that, we will publish that. We will make it available to everybody, but including yourselves as members, and take you through that as well. We did have a lot of people involved in the creation of that improvement plan as well. In addition to that, we obviously had at the same time the SEND Manifesto, which Learn Sheffield led for us, but was a partnership paper. That will be being developed into a strategy over the coming weeks, and by mid-autumn we will be bringing through the strategy, which again will supplement the improvement plan which has been agreed by DFE and NHSE, and is really looking about how we make that shift in the world of SEND and AP in Sheffield over a period of 5 and 10 years, but with some fundamental hard work taking place over the next year to ensure that some of our structural pieces of work are good and fully improved, including our education, health and care plans, including our support for children waiting on lists for neurodiversity diagnosis, and that key theme of trust and confidence in us as partners and professionals. But we will feed further back. I have put in information about Families First, because that's really important about the direction of travel that we are taking, and I'm happy to take questions on it. I'm really happy to celebrate that Steve Kay is in the room, so our Permanent Service Director for Belonging, who is bringing his wealth of knowledge and experience to the work that we're doing, has been part of that improvement journey in Birmingham as well, so brings that understanding of the importance of what it is that we need to do in a complex core city, which is not an easy thing to understand as you're moving around the system. And I've also put in the other posts that we have, really feeling a really strong team within the Belonging Directorate that's really driving change already. I've put in information about the consultancies that have been used over the last 2 years. One of them is Empower, which supported the work around post-16 and the personal transport budgets, but also some individual support consultancy that was brought in to support capacity and experience within our teams, particularly around SEND. And we have the academy conversion information available as well. and I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on Meredith's report? Councillor Whittaker.
Just looking at the where it says there are consistent themes across all policy initiatives, I think they're really good themes. In particular, I think it's really important to destigmatise support. Over the years, I've done a lot of work in the voluntary sector with families, and there was always a stigma in asking for help, and parents felt that if they were asking for help, then they'd already failed. And I think that then meant that the help they got was not as successful because they already had these feelings. And I think referring to it as family help is more important. I currently run a play group, and I know I've sort of signposted several of the parents for support, and they've sort of come back, you know, how good it was and how they're so pleased with the progress their child is now making and that they're making as a family. And so I think that's a really, really good way forward. On Pillar 5, it describes a valued, supported and highly skilled worker for every child who needs one. Do we have the staff level to do that?
We do in Sheffield, so we are in a really strong place in Sheffield, and what this is about as well is making sure that we're celebrating all the different professionals within that world of supporting families, and making sure that it's not just social workers, although I can see all the social workers giving me evil stares over there, but that there's a mix of professionals, and we're celebrating all professionals. And yes, we do have a really strong set of, and again, I think that's historically something that as Sheffield you should be proud of, that you have continued to invest in early help, and so actually we do have a really strong set of staff who support in that area of work. More to do, so I'm not trying to say that we rest on our laurels, there's far more to do, and but that's part of what is that we need to bring all of those staff together, and we need to be focusing on the child and the family rather than on our professional backgrounds, but this helps us to have that conversation.
I think one of the things that's come across loud and clear on this committee over the few years I've been on it is how important it is to get things right in those early years, and how if that happens, that has a knock-on effect of things, you know, of children and young people progressing really well. So I think it's really important, isn't it?
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Councillor Manington.
It's just concerning alternative provision and the number of children who are in alternative provision and how long they're there for. Because obviously, I think everyone acknowledges it should be temporary, and it should be the aim of it should be to get children back into mainstream education. I've read in the press report about the government bringing in some new guidance, I think it might be statutory, to limit the amount of time that children can stay in unregistered alternative provision, which I think is a majority of what our provision is. Is that going to have an impact?
I will, when the alternative provision paper comes, Pat and Polly will be up and be able to answer the specific question around the national guidance. I think the question around use of alternative provision, the level of exclusions, the level of our children not in education is a profound concern which we need to have as a city. And that's why we have the belonging framework. It's to pivot that conversation about children being able to belong in their local school. I think there's a huge amount of work we need to do as a city. Some of that is about alternative curriculum and celebrating the alternative curriculum that children can have. Some of it's about supporting our schools, to support them to understand how they can have more of a belonging ethos. We are linking in with Calm Manor School in Leeds, which is seen as a very strong, inclusive secondary school in the country. So again, what learning can we take from a place which it doesn't exclude children and still has good attainment, not relatively, it still has good attainment for its children, because we've got to have both. So we're on a journey, I think, in Sheffield. We're in a situation that we wouldn't necessarily want to be in. It's all part of the conversation around how we're supporting our children with SEND, how we're supporting our children who we know we're not meeting the needs of, and actually changing that as well in the city. but some of that feeds into the commissioning report that's being brought around alternative provision, and what we're doing in the short term to free up space, but also what we need to do in the longer term to recalibrate what we're doing and how we're doing it in the city.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, very briefly, I note that one of the key areas you talk about for focus is youth exploitation and violence. Now, there's been quite a lot of national news and criticism of some of the government actions about that's diverting attention away from the protection of young women and girls. As far as Sheffield's concerned, are you happy that we've got the balance right?
It's a really, really difficult question to answer, Councillor Williams. As a woman walking back from the election count late at night to the car park, could I say I felt entirely safe? But I don't know if as a man you would feel entirely safe either walking back at that time of night. I think there's a huge amount of work we need to do as a country about how we are, I think, understanding that our young people have a very different life from the one that we had, and how we're supporting them. I think the world of online safety is one which I think is really difficult. And I think that culture, that continued culture, I don't think it's anything new. I think that continued culture of girls always feeling safe is not there. So I think that, but I think that's about us as adults, about us modelling the right behaviour around women and girls as well. So I'm responsible for safeguarding. That's one of the knife edge of my role, is that I'm responsible for ensuring all children are safe. But actually some of that's outside of my purview, because it's how people interact with each other. And I've got to do everything in my power to make sure we've got the strategies in place to support that. And I think we do have a really good sign up to strategies around against violence against women and girls. But there is something which says that that you can never say that you can be 100% certain that our children are safe, because there is a reality to the world we live in which makes it very, very difficult and makes me very uncomfortable.
If I can just come in on this as well, I don't think we can do one or the other. I think we have to be able to focus on both, and I think it's a fundamental cultural shift that we need to accommodate. Children and young people these days are looking through a different lens to what we look through in life, and I think we've made a commitment in this council to look at prevention. And if we are working with children, all children and young people, boys and girls, from a very early age, and role modelling in a positive way, and young men and boys have got good male role models, and we are mindful and we're upskilling parents to be able to parent their children in this modern age with online and technology, I think we're working in an analogue way in a digital age, and I think it's a very big picture and it's a very broad issue, but I think we've got to do it all, which is difficult. But if we get down into the real grassroots of what it's like to raise children, what they're experiencing, by positive role modelling and investing in that prevention work, then I think we will produce good, well-rounded individuals and really confident women, and, you know, men that behave accordingly in public. We've been putting it in long and short of it. So hopefully we can have some really good male role models across the city. Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Whittaker.
Just on that theme, really. I know that Ofsted, often when they've gone into schools, they often ask young people those questions about whether they feel safe in school and whether they feel safe from the boys in school. And I know, not in this authority, but I was having this conversation with my granddaughter, who is soon to be 15, so going into year 10. And her school was recently inspected by Ofsted before they finished it in July. And a few of the girls were taken to one side by the Ofsted inspectors and asked the questions. So I said, oh, what did they ask you? All about, you know, whether they felt safe in school, whether they felt that the boys behaved appropriately towards them, how they thought that had changed as they come from year 7 up to year 9. And so I said, what did you say? So she sort of said that boys needed to be targeted at year 7 because that's when their behaviour seems to be really, difficult for girls. And they think it's okay to touch and to do all sorts of undesirable things. Whereas she said now at year 9, as they've matured that bit, and she said, I tell the Ofsted inspector that I felt all the boys did respect us now. And so I thought, well, if a soon-to-be 15-year-old can work out that, the work needs to be done with the boys in year 7, then I'm sure professional people can do that, can't they? It was quite an interesting conversation to have with a 14-year-old. So yeah.
And I think that's really helpful because I think that our schools are working really hard around that, and I think they do recognise that different sexes mature at different ages, and that's schools know that and they are working. And actually, I suppose there is always that causal link with what the school was doing, which meant that by year 9, your granddaughter was having a different experience. So there is, I think that our schools are acutely aware of their role within this and work really hard at it. And as you say, Ofsted are looking at that as well. So, yeah, I think we should be proud of what our schools do in this space.
Thank you, Meredith. And just on that one, Councillor Whittaker, I think it's what you've pointed out today, what's really, really important is the voice of the child, the voice of young people and their experiences, because we're old now, really, aren't we, in comparison to our young people who are living in it, and listening to what they're suggesting, listening to their experience is really important to be able to help us to be able to design what it is that we're doing. Thank you. Any more questions or comments on this one? Councillor Basham.
Yeah, just about the improvement boards, where and how do they feedback?
So the improvement board meets on a monthly basis. It meets for 3 hours in person. It has the feedback will be so there is a 6-monthly review. So we're looking at the 6-monthly review coming to committee. We'll update you in between times, but the 6-monthly review will come formally, which is DFE and NHSE talking about the progress that has been made to the improvement plan. In addition to that, the spokespeople, the trio, the spokespeople for the 3 parties will be updated on a monthly basis by the independent chair on progress that has been made, any barriers that need to be removed, any challenges that they feel that you need to be aware of through your spokespeople who will feed that back. So you will get a monthly update through that process as well as the formal process. That will also be an update to the Chief Executive of Sheffield City Council, also to the ICB, the Integrated Care Board as well. So there'll be a lot of monitoring.
Thank you, Meredith. Are we all satisfied with Meredith's report? So the recommendation is that we know the report and agree to key activity in the months to come. Are we all okay with that? Thank you very much, that's agreed. So we're on to agenda item number 9, which is our Children's Performance Framework Q1 Performance Report. Who's presenting? Is that you, Meredith?
So I will start because we've got Becky's.
We've got a trio.
We've got a trio. So Steve and Pat as well. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth around the report. This is really important, and again, this again is an indication of the transparent approach we want to have. That this is where we are, this is where we aspire to be, this is what we need to focus on. So this, we had a report earlier in the year. This sets out again exactly where we are. It puts in what has improved, what's not so strong. We know, I've talked to you already about the fact that there was some movement in our children in care figures. Pat and Steve will be able to talk to you about some of the early years foundation stage, Best Start, the 2-year-olds, as well as some of the attendance and exclusion information as well. We did have some improvements, so again there is some strength for our 16 and 17-year-olds with an EHCP, not in education, employment and training. We've seen that that's improved, which is a positive, but actually we've got to do more work downstream from that as well. So there's a huge amount of information in here. There's a huge amount of information which is also what we are looking to do differently, what we are seeing some of our strengths are, but what we are certainly seeing our challenges of across the different priorities that we've got. I'll hand over to Steve and Pat quickly just to give a bit more of an overview, and then we'll take questions, because I think it's probably more important that you're asking us questions than us going through what's in the report, which you've got clearly in front of you.
I just introduced myself to the committee. I'm Steve Kay. I'm the brand new service director for Belonging. So new that I've had to just craft my own name thing there. I've been in the council for 24 hours, so any questions? I suppose what I wanted to say about the performance report, it's really it's good that you've got it. It's important that the committee understands it. It's the first one. As it's more refined, it will lead to some richer conversations. Some of the performance is about the performance of services, but much of that performance is also dependent on the wider system. So, for example, if you think about young people not in education, employment or training, that's not in the remit of a single service to be able to resolve all of those issues, because there are broader issues in terms of employment, inequalities, poverty, etc. Pat's got all of the answers. But I'm happy. I'm new to Sheffield, but not new to this area of work, so I'm happy to answer any general questions as well.
So has anyone got any questions? I mean, thank you for this. I know we've been briefed on it. It is a report, and it is difficult to understand, and I think we've asked for a tutorial on how to understand I mean, it's in black and white for a start off, which is quite difficult because you can't see the red, green and yellow. There's just one thing from me on here, which is around first-time entrance to youth justice system and serious violence. And I know that we've got the Youth Justice Board strategy coming in November, but I'm wondering maybe if you've not got any background information as to cause and effect today, if we could have that, because that, coming back to the conversation we've had around exploitation and youth violence, is a really key thing for us to be focusing on. Have you got any comments?
Yeah, so I'm chair of the Youth Justice Board, and we look at this. We look at this in detail in the meeting. So when you compare our rates to other core cities, other places, we are high. We've really looked to understand what that is, and we're currently working with South Yorkshire Police on finding a solution. So what happens in some areas, and as you know, each police force makes its own decisions, and I have to stress that I find South Yorkshire Police to be really strong children's first police authority, and working with them is really positive. But one of the elements that they don't seem to do is outcome 22, which is where a child can be dispersed if they've been found to be undertaking some level of criminality. They can be dispersed to the youth offending team for the youth offending team to work with them, rather than it going through into a referral as a youth justice criminal referral. And so that's why our figures are higher, and we have had the conversation with the Ministry of Justice around this, and that they also recognise in places where the police force undertake outcome 22, then the number of children coming through into the first-time entrance to the youth justice system is lower. So as I say, those conversations are taking place, and it's really difficult. It's a structural change that would need to take place with the way that frontline police officers are making decisions as well. But we, you know, that is a conversation that we're currently having to see what we can do, because it will also affect Barnsley, Rotherham and Doncaster as well. And all of them have higher figures for children coming into the youth justice system. That being said, we work with all of those children anyway. So actually what happens for those children is the same regardless of whether the police run to taking outcome 22 or not. But it's probably more beneficial for those children that they don't have a criminal record if that can be pushed into a different direction for some of those first-time entrants.
Thank you, Meredith. Any more questions? Councillor Whittaker.
I think it's a really important area of work, isn't it? I run a lunch club for the over 60s, which is in partnership with the community payback team of the probation service. And over the few years I've done it, we've had numerous 18-year-olds who've come along, who've been through the justice service. And, you know, when I hear their story, they don't often, you know, always tell you about them, but when they do, you hear that they've had difficult backgrounds. And, you know, and I often think if these sort of things have been in place to prevent that happening, then they wouldn't be where they were on that particular day. And I think it sets them on a sort of road down the wrong track. And we do need to prevent that from happening. And I think, I mean, I presume that there is a link here with sort of youth provision, isn't there? Sort of youth clubs and putting, you know, children and young people in the right direction and focusing their mind on other things. And yeah.
So I think there is. I think that the direct correlation is actually speech, language and communication, and actually us enabling recently in some conversations with chief executives and multi-academy trust, they've all been doing some separate work around inclusion, and what they know already, but what they are seeing clearly is that where somebody has a reading age of 9 or below, they are less likely to engage in school, they are more likely to become disengaged in a whole range of other activities. And I'm fairly certain that if you went through the children coming into the criminal justice system, and in fact we know that, then that is one of the inhibitors of them engaging within education and with their communities, and that's something we can do something better about, both as parents, as society, and actually within our systems, and something we're focusing in on as well.
And this then links back to us getting it right in the early years, doesn't it? So, yeah.
Thank you. Meredith, did you want to
Well, and I think that's one of the things that you probably within the report will see we need to be better at. So it is the point that Councillor Mallinson made at the beginning, is that whilst we've got a good number of families registered in family hubs, what we do see is the number of 2 and 3 year olds taking up learning education opportunities is not as strong, and also the work around GLD, which is a good level of development at foundation stage, is not good, and I think Pat could probably just say something about that.
Yeah, just coming back, so it is a bit of a weighty tome as a report goes, but actually if you read it as a story of a child going all the way through, I think it takes you through in those respects. So even the 2-year-old fell take up, going into the kind of speech, language and good level of development, whichever way you look at this can take you through the journey of a child, whether that's a very successful positive story or not so successful positive story, but particularly around the area of speech, language and communication, around the areas of good level of development is a very, very strong indicator of potential routes through this system. As I say, it's not a straightforward read, but if you read it as a story, and as a potential story, it just allows you to take it through that process. And you're absolutely right, getting further upstream, particularly around the speech, language, communication. And to do that, you need to take up your early deferral funding, etc. You can see that journey kind of progressing out right through to the kind of not in employment, education and training route at the end. And there is some research and data to kind of back that story up, which is national based and regionally based as well.
Do we know what the barriers are preventing people from taking up nursery places for 2-year-olds?
I think there's a wide number. There is not one single factor within those barriers. It's access, it's potentially cultural. COVID didn't help within those barriers, within the kind of makeup of families. You know, I've often spoke about the potential breaking of a social contract between these organisations and families, and that can have been a barrier to that as well, even within the early years and as we go into the kind of compulsory education phase. So there is not one thing that we are looking at is how we actually focus on that group of families and actually target that group of families in engagement, and certainly the work with the family hubs as well, supporting that is a focus.
Sorry, and I think just on my experience being out in family homes and being out in communities, the issues will vary down to neighbourhoods. It will depend on, you know, traditions in neighbourhoods that, you know, grannies have looked after their children while parents are at work. People don't want to send the children until the school age. COVID has been a factor where they were at home for so long, and we'll just keep them at home and carry on doing what we're doing. So I think, and I do know that I've been out and about all summer in communities, on fields, in events and play days through half, and at every activity I've been to, there has been somebody there from family hubs or from our early years teams trying to engage with parents to find out whether or not they've got their children registered, whether or not they're getting them in. So I've seen it in action out in various communities this summer, but I think it does very much vary, because if we knew what it was, we'd definitely be able to get in there. And I think historically, I think the whole system has changed from birth. Your relationship with your midwife is slightly different. Your health visitors aren't as regular as they used to be. So there used to be more of a pathway into that, particularly with Sure Start programme. You know, you became registered with a children's centre, Sure Start Children's Centre, on discharge from maternity ward, because that information got passed to involvement workers and Sure Start midwives. And that was a brilliant pathway, because you'd got them from day dot, and you knew, and you went out and did an home visit and you explained to parents all the things that were available. And this is where you could do all your speech and language, you dump the dummy, your story sacks, your treasure baskets, and then into provision. And I think that's been a gap in some of our communities where that little bit of extra support has been needed. But I know that our family hubs are working on some of that stuff. Councillor Williams and then Councillor Mellington.
Thank you, and thank you for this report. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of information here. It's just the depth of the information. I mean, taking the example of family hubs, I know that it says it's near target, but if I've read this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the target up to June this year was 2,169, and the performance is 1,500. To me, that isn't particularly near target. There's quite a discrepancy there. And also, it's one thing to be registered with a family hub, but do we know how many families are actually engaging with it, which I think is the more important parameter. Thank you.
So I'm happy to go with that. So I think that I think you're calling exactly the right question. So to a certain extent, we can. So with family hubs, we are capturing the data which we are able to capture, which is around registration. Actually, what you need is a deep dive into. So what does that translate into over the coming weeks, months, years? Now, part of the Test and Learn programme did that. So really looked at how that translated from registration into attendance at programmes. I think that's the next stage of how we extend that. But I suppose one of the questions you could well ask us as a committee member is, I'd really like to understand that, interrogate that. Can we have a deep dive into it to really look at that from the perspective of the family hubs? And I'm more than happy to take that away and for us to do that over this next 3-month period, because I think that then links also to the line at the bottom, which is the early years provision, is actually how does this all fit together? The 2-year-old FEL, take-up of 2-year-old FEL, good learning of development, what's happening in Barnsley, because actually they also don't have particularly great take-up of 2-year-old FEL, really strong 3- and 4-year-old FEL, and really good levels of development, particularly around phonics. So what are they doing that we could do within the city as well? So I think if you wanted that to be taken away as an opportunity, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you. Can we get that on then? Thanks. Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Mellington.
Yeah, just coming back on what Councillor Whittaker said in the previous item about family hubs and how important it is that they are open to all families, and it's trying to change the culture that a parent asking for help shouldn't feel that they're failing. Again, as a parent myself, we did have to have help. We had training, and it was very, very helpful. All parents should have training. No one is born knowing how to do it right, and they might have a very bad example when they were growing up, possibly. So it's it's really important that support is there. But the early years aren't the only issue. There's this. My main interest is in secondary education, and there's a deeply worrying increasing exclusions in both primary and secondary, but particularly secondary. The question is, are all schools a happy place for most young people? Why are so many young people having mental health issues? Is that school caused by school? Genuine learning should be in a calm and supportive environment, not a pressurised one. It is about changing sort of the ethos of education, which is maybe a national picture, but it's something that we can work on locally, I hope, as well, to try and make schools better for children so that they're happier and more engaged.
I think Pat can probably give you a little bit of a update on what's going on there.
Absolutely agree, Councillor Allison, that if children are to learn, they learn in a calm, happy, supported environment. And looking at particular exclusion numbers and some of the suspension numbers, they don't paint a fantastic picture. However, these are not equally spread across the city and in varying different schools and different areas. Towards the end of last year, I think myself, Meredith, met with a number of multi-academy trusts, CEOs, the largest representation within the secondary sector across Sheffield, and had some very powerful conversations. I think more positive than we've ever had with the multi-academy trusts and new CEO leadership within the trust, where they feel responsible for the sector data within this, and it's not just owned by the local authority but owned by the schools and the trust and the responsibilities. So, good examples of a trip to Firth Park Academy where they were looking at their own bridging provision to allow young people that weren't attending before to get back into school, to get settled back into school. They're also looking at working on an alternative provision, so they weren't relying on external alternative provision. And, a very genuinely enjoyable visit, considering it was a day before the end of term as well, which could have been a bit of a difficult one for any secondary school, I know that. But yes, some really positive engagement, and we're certainly working towards that positive engagement and the understanding that inclusion starts with the schools and the culture and the curriculum and all those sorts of things. But yeah, a positive kind of end to the year.
Thank you, Pat. Any more questions or comments on this paper? No. So the recommendation for this is to note the performance report update for Q1, to agree to help shape what performance measures make up future reporting, highlight any issues of concerns that you may wish to be discussed in future through the performance reports. Let's try and get my words out right. So are we all agreed? Yep, that's great. Thank you very much. So then we go on to agenda item number 10. Kind of segued into this is to alternative provision for primary children excluded from school. And I think Polly's come in with Pat. Or you must not staying, Pat? Oops. So we've got Polly. Thank you. Are you staying, Pat? Great stuff. So we've got Polly and Pat. Thank you.
There we go. So we've spoken already today and previously at committee about the very challenging growing number of school exclusions that we've got and the need to take a new approach to this. So one of the changes that we're making that I'm here to talk about today is for primary school children who've been excluded from school. We're expanding a service that we've trialled over the past year, and that's having local hubs attached to primary schools. So Sheffield Inclusion Centre is now going to focus on secondary school aged children who it provides a good education to, and given the increased numbers of exclusions we've had, this will allow us to meet the needs of a larger number of children there. So, in November last year, we opened a pub at Abbeyfield Primary School called The Borough, with 10 places. This year, that hub will expand to 20 places, and there will be another hub with 6 places at Tinsley School. We're also exploring a third hub in the south. Now, these are all being provided by Five Rivers Trust, a small local trust with 2 good schools in areas with multiple challenges. So the hubs at Abbeyfield and Tinsley, these will be registered alternative provision provided by a school. Now, last year, the hub at Abbeyfield met all of its targets that we set out, and the idea of these hubs is that they emulate the experience of going to a mainstream school. So for a primary school aged child, going to this hub, they're in the school uniform, they feel like they're just at a local school. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the borough to show you why we think it's the right approach for these children. So the borough provides a structured, nurturing environment for children with high student-to-staff ratios. It provides outdoor learning in a forest school environment where children are learning how to play together, and they have targeted social and emotional development interventions. Now, there's a huge emphasis on the importance of making progress in English and maths. They have a phonics scheme that they're using to teach reading, and they have a qualified teacher doing this teaching. Every child has individual plans and targets. Now, we're all here because we care about giving all children, and particularly those facing adversity, the best start. And I can absolutely say that that's what I feel these children are getting in this setting. It's not about a setting that's there to punish children at all. It's about really supporting them and resetting their relationship with education after they've been excluded from their previous school. Now, all of the children that have passed through this service so far have some level of special educational needs, but also multiple adverse experiences, for example, living in overcrowded accommodation or parental imprisonment. So it's really important that the service also works with the family, and there are half-termly home school meetings. Exclusion often means that the family relationship with school and education has broken down. Many of these children were very low attenders at their previous school. All have improved their attendance, which now stands at 80% overall. So we need to show that school can be a good experience for the child and rebuild that relationship with education. Now, some of the things that families and students say are, we had a student that said, I really like working with all the teachers. They listen to me and understand when I tell them how I am feeling. It's lots of fun, even when I have to work. And another parent said, I was going to take him out of education altogether, but now I can see how he's doing here. I feel like I can give school another chance. So we have an educational psychologist working with the trust, ensuring that children have EHCPs if needed, and finding out what works for each child. You know, why did things go wrong, and how can we help this child have success in education? We work with other services as well, so family intervention services are joined up with some of these children. There's half-termly multidisciplinary team meetings where you've got sensors, and making sure that the support around these families is well coordinated. One of the great things about the hub being based on a school site and being part of the school is that there's opportunity for these children to integrate with the school. So last time I visited, we went to the main school playground where 2 of the children in the borough had struck up some friendships with children in the main school, and they're all playing together, and that was a really nice thing to see. Now, this model is really about reintegration into school. So it's about the child spending 2 to 3 terms in this service and working out how can we support this child to get back into school. Many of the current children have not yet been there 2 terms, but we've had one, for example, who's just been put forwards for reintegration, which is fantastic, and we've got the family supporting that plan as well, which is really good. And every child starts this service with reintegration in mind. Now, it may be slightly slower for some children, as there will be some children who will need special school placements, but what we really want to see is that children's experience at the borough and the other hubs that we're putting forward restarts their educational journeys in a positive light, making sure that they get the right support and that they have success at secondary school and beyond. And then what I'd say is that my kind of second hope after that is that what we can do with the borough, with the service that we've established, is what we want to see is that exclusions from primary schools go down over time, because we know that we're doing the work with schools, which was previously mentioned. However, what you can then use these hubs for is prevention interventions for schools. So if a school comes along and says, we're really struggling with this child, we're not quite sure how to make things work, we need some support, we need to know how best to support this child, that instead of taking excluded children, this service could take children for a term and do that work and help the school to keep that child. So yeah, I really think this is the right thing, and that's why I'm asking the committee to approve it.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you for this. This has been something that we need, and I think we need it at secondary as well. I think this is something we've talked in depth about exclusion and the term permanent exclusion, and how that is just a catastrophic term for any family who is then told your child is permanently excluded. They feel that that's the end of the road for their child because that's the end of their education, and actually exclusion and suspension are two very different things. And I have people are nodding along, but I just have, this is just a great opportunity. I do have some questions, and I'm sure other members will have, Councillor Whittaker, but just, if you don't mind, just before I forget, because on question, point 1.2, where it says it offers short-term full-time provision for 2 to 3 terms, and you talked about reintegration. Are children reintegrated into a local school near to them? Because otherwise I'm trying to work out what capacity would be like at Abbeyfield and Tinsley if they've just then got all of the children, and it'll just become another another PRU.
Absolutely. So the children are reintegrated into a local school. Now, in a small minority of cases, that could be Abbeyfield or Tinsley, but for the vast majority of children, it's likely to be a school closer to home. And what we do is work with the parents to look at, what school do they feel comfortable sending their child to, and then an application is made through the normal processes. So, yes, it'll be a variety of schools.
Thank you, Polly. Councillor Whittaker.
I think this model is really good. I think it's quite sad to think that primary school children are excluded. And I like the idea that they're just going to another school where they'll get the support they need, and that the reintegration is always the main focus. Because I think in the past, children have gone to alternative provision and they've ended up staying there far too long. And that's caused issues. So I think it's really good that reintegration is always on the forefront. I'd really welcome a review in the future, and a note that they've got the 2-year break clause and things, and it would be nice if, I don't know, after 12 months, whatever, that the committee gets a review on how this model is working and how successful it's being and how many children have been reintegrated and what the average time is and all that. So thank you.
Any more comment? Oh, Councillor Smith.
Thank you for the report. Very interesting read. I've been working with a family whose child is only 6, who in the last term of school that we've just finished and now restarting was excluded 12 times. The child's still waiting for a EDH, I can't remember that. Thank you, Chair. Report. But speaking to the parents, and as an outsider, I just wonder, and I mean this with the greatest respect, do you feel that schools have or need to have training on, because it seems to me that more and more, we've got more and more young people that have got the label of ADHD and autism. And I personally believe in mainstream education and local schools. So I wonder whether we need to do more work about trying to keep the kids in the school, that their local school, as opposed to moving them to a different school.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think the key to the training point is probably around consistency rather than just kind of a blanket idea that everybody does need to keep on top of the training. Everybody needs to be developing their kind of knowledge. However, that's not always as consistent. But I'd also add demand to that as well, that sometimes the demand in school, whereas if you've got a larger number of these kind of incidents or young people with a particular need, you sometimes play a little bit catch up in how to kind of deal with that. And then quite often you develop that expertise within that provision. And some schools are actually very successful because they have a high demand. I think it's always the ambition. And I think I'd stand by this, that every head teacher I've met across the city believes in inclusion within their school. It's not always as easy to deliver consistently, but I think every head teacher believes inclusion in the inclusion agenda. The demands on the system are very, very difficult. The training is not as consistent across all sectors, and we are, as the local authority and our relationship with Learn Sheffield, but also the multi-academy trusts themselves, have a part to play in kind of developing that. But the last thing I would talk about within the schools, and people that know me would always say, what we call the curriculum, the diet of the children within the school has to respond to the need of the children in the school as well. And all those things I think then need to balance out to create what we call an inclusive model. It's not just one element. It's not about the training of the teachers just to deal with that, or the culture of the school to actually cope with that. You also need the curriculum, the diet, the lessons, etc. They all play an equal part in that structure, and then we start to get into the area of inclusion and feeling more inclusive as a sector.
Thanks, Pat. I know Pat's been doing a lot of work on this and working really closely with schools, and I know Meredith and Toby want to come in, but I think one good thing that I will point out is that the government have stated that any new teachers that are trained now have got SEND training as part of their teacher training package, because, you know, teachers, and they're clearly not going to be specialists in an area, because, you know, that takes a lot of training and it's ongoing, but I think as part of that teacher training journey, all teachers should have SEND training, so that's a positive outcome. Meredith and then Councillor Mallison, as Pat answered it. Councillor Mallison.
Thank you. Yeah, as a parent of kids with autism, you know, and as a supply teacher back in the day, I would walk into a class and the teacher would say, watch out for that child there, and I'd look at that child, and it just would be almost immediate to me that that child had autism, and, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was just, it wasn't obvious to the teacher, obviously, you know, which was a problem. And so it is fantastic if teachers are getting better SEND training and more experience. But it's a shame that we need this. I think the idea is a sound one. We absolutely need to try and get away from this alternative provision, unregistered and so on. The problem we're up against is the fragmented nature of the education system and the difficulty that all schools, maintained schools and academies, are so independent that they will have different cultures, and the child might have a great time at Tinsley, but they go into a school nearer them and the culture isn't right, and so it's how you manage that individual transition and persuade. You know, that obviously that new school needs to be very engaged in that process, and how you persuade them to do that. I don't know if there's any funding available, which might sweeten things for them.
So very much part of the model is that it's a supported reintegration for that child. So the school are talking to each other, the child is going in with a plan, they're saying, okay, this is what works for that child. It could be gradual, so that the child is doing 2-3 days a week and then building that up. So yes, it is a challenge because that school might be quite different and you don't know that all individual teachers are going to take everything on board, but the idea is that we use what we've learnt about this child and how to support them to then move them to a better place in education.
And obviously it's individual staff in that new school as well who may or may not, you know, be that engaged in the idea. Yeah. And it's sort of trying to find people who are to make it.
And I think at primary that's perhaps less of a challenge when you've got one class teacher, but certainly at secondary when you've got multiple teachers across different subjects, that's where inclusion can be really challenging, because you don't always know all the children in your class, you don't always have the time to apply all the strategies, and so a kind of more strategic approach around the inclusion of that child is more challenging.
So what size of group is it in Tinsley and Abbeyfield?
So in Tinsley it's going to be for 6 children. In Abbeyfield we're increasing the size from 10 to 20, and that's simply because of the different spaces available at each of the sites.
Okay, because obviously with 6 it's more like a special school ethos in a sense, just that the staff ratio is so favourable.
Yeah.
And I have taught in special and mainstream and know that there's huge cultural difference. And
yes, there's a hard...
And so suddenly moving that kid into a class of 30, hopefully with a TA as well as a teacher.
Yeah, it can be a challenge, and one of the benefits, as we spoke about, was that the children have the opportunity to do some integration at the school site. So there's, you know, playing with the children in the playground, there's the opportunity to join on school trips, to join in some mainstream classes. So you get to kind of test out those strategies that the child has learned to make sure that they can also see how to apply them in a larger setting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bannister, please.
Yeah, a couple of little things. Are we offering this to all our primary schools at the moment, or are we restricting whilst we're rolling the programme out? And when we do reintegrate the children, are we reintegrating them back to the school they came from, or more of a local school in order to reduce any potential stigma?
Can I just come in on when a young person's excluded from school, officially excluded from school, that legally they cannot return to that school. So it wouldn't be the same school. It's a kind of point of reference on that one. Well, currently it can't happen.
No. Yeah, so they'll be reintegrated into a different school. In terms of the service being open to all schools, we're not sort of advertising it as if you want to exclude your children, they can come here. But any child who is excluded, we are looking at this service for them. So yes, it wouldn't matter which primary school they came from.
Councillor Bashra.
Thank you. First of all, the whole thing it sounds really, it's obviously important, trying to actually get to those kids as soon as possible so that there's not a gap, and being able to reintegrate them back into education. One question is from myself, just looking at all it, what is currently the current provision doing in terms of keeping, addressing the situation. And then obviously, I understand obviously once there is nothing more that the school can do, that's when this initiative is important to be able to address those issues and work with the child straight away. So before we even get into that stage, how much and what is being done to make sure that everything is being done before?
That is, you know, we have a very large number of, we're talking about primary schools in Sheffield, so there isn't a consistent, this has to be done at this point and this has to be done at that point. As I say, I've not met any schools, particularly primary schools, that wouldn't describe themselves as inclusive and not go through a process of kind of adapting the provision for that child. However, if they go down the route of what we call permanent exclusion, that has to be what we call a serious breach of the school's behaviour policy. So that might be a persistent serious breaches of a constant serious breaches, or one very, very serious incident. At that point, it's the head teacher, and the head teacher's only right to permanently exclude. And I'm using the term permanently exclude. I know Councillor Dale's just giving me the eyeball as we said that. To make that decision to exclude that child from the school. At that point, then it becomes our responsibility after the 6th day of that provision to look after that child and find a place, ideally back into mainstream education. By the nature of a permanent exclusion, sometimes the reintegration immediately back into full-time mainstream education isn't possible, and it sometimes, looking at some of the provisions like this, isn't always the immediate right thing to do as well, to actually get. So for instance, this example of a primary provision which is reintegration focused, which is trauma informed, which actually kind of deals with the issues at hand and then look towards getting them back in 2 terms. Yes, it's very, very unfortunate that those children have been excluded from their school, but actually, if we get this provision right, they go back into those schools in a better state than they left the schools, and possibly a better state than they were a year before they left those schools as well.
Yeah. One thing that the CEO of the Trust has said to me is that all the children that have come through the provision, their schools did try many, many different things. And she says she doesn't have a single child who she feels that the school just sort of let go. That all these children were really worked with very hard, but I think perhaps the relationship at that school had broken down, and being in a different environment, having a kind of a restart, has made a change for some of these children.
Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, just about the 2 terms to back in. I'm assuming that's more of an aim than an actual cut-off, and you will work with children until they're ready to be reintegrated. But I agree, it's very good to have an aim rather than just having it as a back-ended process.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an aim for 2 to 3 terms, because it's important that children don't get stuck in this provision, but it will really vary for each child. So we have one child who, in less than 2 terms, has been judged ready for reintegration, and there are other children where, for example, there might be undiagnosed special educational needs, there's a draft DHCP plan going for the process, and so actually reintegration looks a bit different for that child, because they might be looking at a special school placement, depending on parental preference. So there, you might not be looking at 3 terms, but I think going in with that aim in mind of let's get it done within a 24-week period, if there are no external barriers, is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate the timescales and the goals, but I also really appreciate the personalised approach to this. I think that's really fundamental. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for clarity, you're talking about an extra 43 places.
So currently have 10 places. By the end of this academic year, or I think probably by April, there will be an additional 16 places. So they're being phased throughout the year, because you don't want to suddenly introduce 10 children at once. So from this week, we've got an additional 4 places at Abbeyfield and an additional 4 places at Tinsley. So as of this week, we've got 18 places. By April, I'm hoping we will have 26 places across Abbeyfield and Tinsley. Now we are looking at a site in the south. I don't have much more I can say about that in the moment, but I'm hoping that, again, by the end of this year, we'll be looking at 15 places in the south of the city, and that would take us up to, I think, 41 altogether. Obviously, this report has been written, and things are subject to small changes as we go through. So an additional 31 places throughout the course of this year is my hope.
Thank you. And how does that represent the demand? Because obviously, does that, once all 43 places are in place, does that basically cover the demand, or is there still lots of other kids out there who just don't have an opportunity to take advantage of this scheme?
It's difficult to say. The hope is that we will have enough places to cover demand. What we don't know are what exclusions from school will look like over the course of this year. So exclusions from primary school were 29 last academic year, and that was up from 23 the year before and 21 the year before that. So there has been a trajectory of an increase. Our hope is that that goes down, but I can't promise that. Also, we don't know how quickly these children are going to be reintegrated, because, as we said, that kind of depends on each individual child. So at the moment, I think we have 31 children who are in need of provision like this. And if we're planning to have 41 to 43 places, that means there's some wiggle room over the course of this year to take more children. But if we have 29 children excluded this year and we struggle with reintegration, then we might find ourselves short at some point. It's a real challenge to get the kind of exact number of places right. But that will have to be constantly reviewed and thought of in tandem as well about our kind of prevention strategy, because there is a risk that we expand the number of places forever, and that probably wouldn't be the right thing to do.
Yeah, I guess my personal concern is that with this resource in place, it might almost subconsciously motivate schools to push kids down a way rather than actually give them the support in school. Well, I've seen this done in other parts of the country, and I'm just slightly concerned, and I'm sure that you must have thought, well, I know you would have thought that.
I think that's why we need to be looking at prevention in tandem and not expanding this service forever, because I think that is something we need to think about.
Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, following on from Councillor Williams, on that sort of theme, really, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are lots of children who don't get permanently excluded but do end up leaving their schools into alternative provision direct from schools who place them. So there are lots of, in a sense, in my mind, but maybe I'm wrong, so I would like to be corrected, that there are lots of children who are not sort of catered for, even though that they're out of mainstream education.
Yeah, this would be a Ofsted registered 5-day alternative provision, which would mean that they could go there for five days. Some schools will use non-registered alternative provision. We have a framework in Sheffield that kind of regulates that. Used well, alternative provision as part of a wider curriculum offer can work for many students and can work for schools. Used well, high quality provision that talks to the schools and the families, and they work together on a reintegration package. That's, it's been commonly used probably in education since I was a long time ago in education in some shape or form, whether that be a college or a different provider. So yeah, it's not the most that a child can do in a non-registered is 3 days per week. So they can't do 5 days a week in one provision, because that would be classed as an unregistered school, if that makes sense. So we keep 3 days a week as a maximum. At primary, that is not used as often as it is in secondary. It's used much less often in primary in sectors than it is in secondary.
Thanks, Pat. I think, while I don't want to stump debate, because this is a really important issue, what I would ask is that we probably have a member briefing specifically focusing on this issue around exclusion, AP. I think if we can just pull it, because I've got lots of questions. If we've got 31 primary school children and we're only offering 18 places, then we've got, I'm not good at maths, but we've got a number of children who have not got a place, and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of questions, I think, and we're all, the debate in itself has shown that we're all really interested in this area. So if I could ask for us to get a briefing on this particular issue, not this paper about the setting, but the overarching issue around exclusion, which we are working on. I just think that some new members won't kind of be caught up as to where we're at with it. If everybody wouldn't mind, I'm just mindful that we're on item number 10 and we've got another 5 items to go. Councillor Mallison.
Could I just ask, in advance of that briefing, that the report from Learn Sheffield that was issued last spring about alternative provision is circulated to the committee? It's quite a brief, very concise report with quite very interesting and shocking information in it.
We commissioned a piece of work from Learn Sheffield around alternative provision, so we'll get that out to you all as well, and then we can have a good conversation about it, if that's okay. Thank you. So on this one then, thank you for that, and lots of questions there, which is great. If we can approve the commissioning of the proposed primary AP places in response to the demonstrated and growing need, in doing so note the spend of up to 1.29 million annually for up to 43 places, and note the capital cost of approximately £310,000 to bring new provision on board. Do we all agree? Yep, that's great. Thank you very much for that. We're going to move on to item number 11, which is the school to pool contract tender. If you'd like to find your name tag and introduce yourselves, thank you. We're on page 101 if anybody's looking. Okay, if you'd like to introduce this paper, thank you. And introduce yourselves, thanks.
I'm Emma Banks and I manage the school swim service and Thornbridge Outdoors and the educational visit service, but today I'm here to talk about school swimming. The paper that you've all got is about basically we need to renew contracts with the buses that we use to get the children to the pools where they learn to swim. The school to pool transport contract, it forms a massively critical part of the swim service. The service delivers a statutory curriculum swimming lessons to primary age pupils, so it's just primary. Schools have got an obligation to teach children to swim before the end of Key Stage 2. This contract ensures the safety, timely, equitable transport of thousands of pupils from their schools to local pools every single year. The current contract and framework just needs to be renewed, so it's not something new, it's the same as what we've been doing for the last 4 years. And I'm coming here today to get permission to put in place the new contracts, put it through the proper procurement process and carry on doing what we're doing. So yeah, any questions, please?
Any questions or comments? Yep, Councillor Bannister.
Just about the sort of green nature of the vehicles used, I guess. Do you have any control over that, or is it just a question of you just subbing out to? We provide the service, don't we? If I remember correctly, and it's subbed into the schools. So just seeing that we're using our newer and better vehicles, so we're causing less environmental damage. And the other question I had was about obviously it's statutory that we provide this service, but the schools pay for it, as I recall, and they pay back into the council. So is there any allowance within budget if the school can't afford that, if they feel that they really need to use other things but have to have a statutory requirement, do we in any way fill that gap?
So on your first subject, which is the environmental impact, the whole way we run the system does reduce the environmental impact and the number of buses going through the city. If schools were to have to organise their own transport, they'd be like 3 buses coming into the city and back out again, whereas here we've only got 1 and it's like a well-oiled machine. They sort of go to one school, come back, go to another school, come back. In terms of our influence over the companies, when it's weighted in the procurement strategy, so there is questions on whether they're going to upgrade their fleet, about all sorts of questions that I can't quite remember, but there's a lot of them in there about the environment and making sure their fleet's upgraded, and also the CAS charges and things, we take that into account. We do have one company at the moment who don't pay the CAS charge because their buses are exempt, but at the start of last year we had a few troubles with that because the buses broke down because they weren't quite as used to having this special piece of equipment on their exhaust pipe. So there's lots of issues, and buses, to be honest, are quite it takes up quite a lot of my team's time just sorting it all out, because there'll be a bus late and all that sort of thing. But the way we run it is the most efficient we can run it as possible. The bus companies, I think there are they work with the CAS team at Sheffield City Council and have input into the clean air zone, and the money that's being spent on the clean air zone, the money that comes in from the clean air zone, the bus companies are a part of the conversation about how that money's then spent. But in terms of me making a bus company buy an electric bus, for example, I don't have much sway. And actually, the last time we ran this procurement, we went from 2 companies that we were using to 4, because we went out and did loads of cold calling, basically, of companies that we thought would be really good and had more compliant buses. And we did up our bus companies to 4, which makes us much more resilient, and we don't have to use them all the time, so they can sort of bid in if we have new contracts come up. So if we decide to use another pool, we can then put that out to all the companies as part of the framework and allow the companies to bid in, so that as long as they're on that framework, we can use various different companies to make sure it's the most local one to that area as well.
Thank you.
But yeah, in terms of what was the other one again, your question? It was about school funding.
Yeah, just the fact that if the statutory, so therefore if schools can't afford this provision, they feel they need to put their resources into other areas, if we have any support for that.
It's really, school swimming is really expensive. It's about £5 per pupil per session without the transport. The transport almost doubles the amount of cost to the school. It's really expensive. We've seen the impact of that in that schools will buy the bare minimum in some cases. In other cases, some schools buy lots of swimming and really prioritise it. So it's just about what the school believes they need to prioritise for those kids, and I think that's probably right, because there might be other issues in schools that they have to spend their money on. In terms of us subsidising things, we don't subsidise the swimming or the transport at all. The schools have to fund that, but we potentially will see schools buying less if they can't afford it. We do a lot where we try and encourage schools to walk the children to the pools if they can, or get the tram if they can. We would prefer that, because then we don't have buses turning up late. So yeah, where we can, it's really promoted that the schools walk, and then that saves them loads of money as well.
Thanks, Emma. I think we can move on now. I think that's fine. Thank you. So the recommendation on here is to seek the approval for the reprocurement of school-to-pool transport service framework, which provides safe and reliable transport for pupils across Sheffield to access statutory swimming lessons during the school day. Do we all agree? Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. So the next item on the agenda is on page 121, and it's a Family First Partnership, and Emily is delivering on this one. Thank you. Okay, if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk us through your report, thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Amy Budray, I'm Assistant Director of Commissioning.
Afternoon, councillors. I'm Emily Ward, I'm a commissioning officer within Amy's Children's Commissioning team. We're here just to talk about the Families First Partnership Programme. I know Meredith had mentioned it earlier, but in particular regarding the grant funding that comes along as part of the programme. So within your paper you have an overview of what the Families First Partnership Programme is, and essentially it's a national reform initiative led by the Department for Education. So very much looking at rebalancing the system away from crisis intervention, focusing on transforming the system of help, support, protection for families through earliest intervention and prevention, and aims to ensure that families can access the right support at the right time, helping families stay together safely. So again, very much built on our success that we've got in the city, which was the National Supporting Families Programme. We referred to it as Building Successful Families, and where the national team had stated before and acknowledged that we have high levels of maturity across our early help system. So in June of this year, each local authority was asked to identify their initial thoughts about what delivery could look like for the Families First Partnership Programme, because this is intended to be a
a transformational year up until April 1st, 2026, with then full implementation and rollout from April 1st. So we looked at what the possibilities of that delivery plan could be, looking at embedding family help model, rebalancing the front door, strengthening the multi-agency working that we've already got, but very much looking at activities being phased, co-designed and anchored in shared priorities that align with things such as the send improvement work that's going on, the Family Hub Start for Life offer, and other strategies that we've got going within the council. A full overview of the progress can be found within section 3.1 of your paper, but we would like to highlight a few key pieces. So we know that we've got very strong leadership commitment and active engagement for partners in social care, health, education, police and commission services to ensure that we're able to implement and roll out this new reform successfully. We are developing work streams and they're in place to develop aspects of the Families First Partnership Programme in line with the programme ambitions. We've got well-established early help infrastructure with family hubs in each locality. And we do have a wide range of community-based early help services that offer prevention and universal plus support as well. We know that our partnership with the VCF sector is a particular strength that provides flexible community-rooted provision for families, and we've tried to increase that over recent years. And we know that there's a shared ambition across children's services to simplify the system and provide relational and proportionate responses to all needs of families. We've started holding consultation events with partners in July 2025, and further consultation events are planned for the coming months with partners, but also children, young people and families. And we do now have programme managers that have been assigned to the FFPP that again have got background within that Building Successful Families programme, which is really positive. So essentially the FFPP will be funded via 2 grants. So the Children and Families grants, which consolidates 7 existing funding streams that we used to have, one of which was the Supporting Families programme and should be used to support the delivery of statutory duties. And then the second is the Children's Social Care Prevention grant, which is enabling direct investment into additional prevention activity through the transition to family help. So it's expected that approximately 30% of this grant funding is spent on transformational activity to establish effective and sustainable practice and service change. They're the guidelines from the DFE. Both grants are allocated to areas of activity which align to the conditions of the grant, and a balance of 1.1 million remains which supports the new activity in addition to the 2.99 million from what was the Supporting Families funding, but what we call BSF funding, and that's committed to existing activity. The Strategic Director of Children's Services, we're asking to hold the delegation of the programme grant funding and make decisions on funding in line with the SCC processes. There are over 5 pages of grant conditions as part of the documentation. It is not for the faint-hearted. We are getting the funding paid within 12 monthly instalments, and funding can be clawed back by the national team should they feel that SCC are not making the necessary progress with partners on reform activity. That is a whistle-stop tour of what is the FFPP. But if you do have any questions, please do ask.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it sounds very exciting. I'm just a bit surprised that there isn't more reference to family hubs, because I would have thought that, I think you mentioned it once, and I can't actually see if it's in there in the report, but I can't actually see any reference to them, and I would have thought that the whole thing should start with family hubs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It completely does. This paper very much focuses on the grant funding and the delegation, which is why we've not got much conversational approach about the wider aims of the programme. But you're absolutely right. If you look at what the national team envisage as part of the family help and the reforms completely, it's very much left-hand side, your community support, earliest intervention, prevention. One of our VCS partners called it the garden gate of support. So even before you get through that front door, what have you got there that they can support? Family hubs, the Start for Life programme is very much ingrained. Our service in particular is the Early Years and Early Help Commissioning team. We work really closely with the Education and Skills Service to ensure that actually our programme aligns. So in terms of the model framework that the Family Hub Start for Life programme has got in place for 25-26, we've already started mapping that across to the Families First programme partnership programme guidance to ensure that, one, we're not duplicating roles, we can maximise efficiencies, but also we're getting best value for money across both programmes, whilst ensuring that we're offering the best services for children, people and families.
Thank you. So, the recommendation for this report is to note the developments and plans within the Family First Partnership programme to date following its introduction in April 2025 and approve the delegation of both the Children's Social Care Prevention Grant and the Children and Families Grant, now known as Family Help, to the Strategic Director of Children's Services in order to release the plans set out in the document for a total of 8.5, just over 8.5 million. Do we all agree? Agreed. Thank you very much. So I'm just mindful that it is 4 o'clock and are we all right to extend the guillotine just so we can get these final 3 items, well, one of them's in closed session, but these final 2 items through. Is that okay? All agreed. Thank you. Okay, so we've now got the staying close item number 13 on page 157 and Izzy Fisher's presenting. Thank you, Izzy.
Good afternoon. I hope you've had an opportunity to read the report. The purpose of the report is to request permission to accept some further funding for our Staying Close project from the Department of Education. The Department of Education has offered Sheffield City Council a further £783,000 for the project. Just to summarise, the Staying Close project is a specific project that works with a cohort of care leavers who are leaving care from residential care. We know that's one of the most trickiest transitions to make. If our children are in foster care, they have an opportunity to stay put and stay longer in placement. That differs for our children in residential care. The project, some of you may remember, started in 2022. It's a pilot project, and we were awarded at that time 1.7 million from the Department of Education. It was a slow start because we required some recruitment of staff to get the project going and to build up the cohort of young people we were working with. That's resulted in an underspend last year. We've had permission from the Department of Education to carry that underspend over, and combined with the further funding, that will fund the project for 2 years, which we hope will carry on the work and develop the work that's been undertaken with our care leavers and broaden the cohort of care leavers who are being worked with from 40, where it stands currently, to around 20% of our care leaving population. The work that's been undertaken by the project is under 4 key areas: education, employment and training, a gradual move to independence, and well-being and connectivity. These priorities come from the outcome of our Bright Spot survey on life beyond care. As you recall, we have many bright spots for our looked after children who, generally speaking, enjoy a positive experience in care. But we know when young people move on to independence, that's not always as positive. And our young people report loneliness, isolation, not feeling safe in the community, problems with anxiety and depression, and are particularly overrepresented in the cohort of young people not in education, employment and training. Over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen some really innovative, bespoke support for care leavers in the Staying Close project and really exciting outcomes. I know the young people involved in the project from my experience as service manager for looked after children, and I know their background stories and some of the challenges they've experienced. And the achievements they've made through the support of this bespoke work is really remarkable. It's very, very exciting. Young people in employment, young people passing functional skills, working on our allotment, being engaged in cooking skills with blend. Some really, really exciting opportunities. One of the most exciting opportunities is some work that's being done. Often our care leavers don't have very much put on the CVs when they're applying for jobs. So we have part of the project is a strand called Starting Somewhere, and that allows young people to undertake training that we've already got, digital training for our employees, to develop some things to put on the CV, and also to have some experience in work trials in work experience to really build up that CV, to give them the confidence and experience to succeed when they apply for jobs. I know that the Staying Close manager, Anna Daniels, would be delighted to spend time with any councillor who would be more interested to see what's happening. And please feel free to contact me or any of my colleagues to get that arranged, because it's really exciting, some of the things that are happening. And I think it'll give us some good indication about what works and what we need to do in the future. Just in terms of exiting the project, currently there's a bill going through Parliament which may make it a duty for the local authority to continue this Staying Close work. So this interim funding is to help us continue with that work until that bill's passed in Parliament and we know the outcome of that and potential future funding. We have got, as part of the exit plan, we have considered redundancies in case further funding's not forthcoming, or that that part of the bill doesn't get passed. I don't know if, has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Ite. Councillor Mallington.
Yeah, thanks for all the fantastic work that's been done on this. You've got a couple of questions. Firstly, just this sort of technical one. You said at the beginning there's 40 this year. 40 people were looked after or supported this year. And then it's expanded to 20% of care leavers. What number is that? How many? Or do you know?
Well, it's an ambitious target. It would be another 40 this year and another 40 the following year. The intention is to expand that cohort of young people that we're being worked with. The original cohort was to work with those young people who are leaving care homes in Sheffield or neighbouring cities. And that was about travelling distance, about access to group work. The intention is to extend that cohort to young people who are currently placed in residential placements outside of the city and offer some support virtually as well as visits to the city to support them in that transition back to Sheffield. To extend the cohort to some of our unaccompanied asylum seekers who are currently living in semi-supported accommodation, and to extend that support to our children who are in custody to ensure that they're well prepared for when leaving custody for adult life and leaving care. So I think it's entirely realistic, and we've got staffing in place and agreed resource control to extend some of that staffing to cover that. But it feels like the project is really maturing now and in a position to take that extra work on.
It certainly sounds like something that's so important to have on an ongoing basis. As you alluded to, it could just stop. I mean, in the worst case scenario, if the Parliament doesn't pass that bill and presumably funding isn't provided, is there any learnings that have been embedded in some way?
Absolutely. We're gathering learning all the time. You'll see in the report, we can see that young people are saying that they're benefiting most from that one-to-one support. So each young person on the project can have up to 5 hours support a week from someone they choose. That might be an ex-residential worker, another support worker in the community, and that's really, really popular. Young people are telling us that the support that they appreciate the most is that support to get an employment, education and training. So that's incredibly positive. So we're learning all the time about what's working and what young people are finding beneficial. And that good practice is being shared with our personal advisors who also support the young people, care leavers as well. So hopefully that will build in good practice should the project be scaled down in the future.
Thanks, Ite. Any more questions or comments on this one? Councillor Bannister.
Just a comment, really. I mean, clearly it's the one-to-one support that the young people want, and I'm assuming it's also the most expensive way of doing it, because that's where your large staffing costs are coming in.
I think it's the intensive support, really, that young people are getting. So actually getting a young person who's not been in school or education for some time back into doing those functional skills and motivated and confident to be in a group environment does take a lot of intensive work to begin with. We've seen that as that cohort is moving on, they're able to break free and do that much more independently. So it is intensive work to begin with, but once they've developed those skills and feeling more confident, that support does tailor off.
Yeah. I'm just going to say on that basis, I do feel it's something we should be supporting, because it's just really important work. And yeah, we keep talking about going downstream. This isn't even downstream, but it is then potentially breaking into the next bit where we've got all those problems with sort of adult services. We head it off now with some really good work, get these people supported, and then get on with their lives.
And it's, yeah, absolutely, it's building those naturally occurring networks. If young people are at an allotment, meeting other people who are gardening, I mean, it's been lovely to see them harvest the food this year and to take that food to blend and be cooking from fresh, really, meals with that food. So it's really life skills, but also that connectivity with people in the local community, which will be there long after we're gone. So it is really, really positive that young people are not becoming dependent on professionals, but are meeting people socially, in social groups, and building that connectivity in the local communities. It's great work.
Thanks, Izzy. So if we just go to our recommendations then, the recommendations is to accept the funding and approve the spending plans for the Staying Close project 2025 to 27, funding so we can continue to deliver the service we are providing for our Staying Close cohort of young people. The funding and spending plans have already been reviewed and approved by Children's Services, Senior Leadership Team and the funder. Do we agree? Thank you. But before you leave, Izzy, I just want to say thank you. So this is Izzy's last meeting as she's leaving the council. So, and I know I've already done this once in Community Parenting Board, but not in this forum. So I would again just like to say thank you for all your dedication and commitment to children, our children in Sheffield. You've left a legacy and your fingerprints will be all over this service. So thank you very much from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay then, the next item is the autism outreach paper on page 179, and I think I've got Rebecca and Bridget. Okay, if you'd like to present, thank you.
Good afternoon, committee and chair. My name is Bridget Atkins. I'm the Assistant Director for Commissioning and Partnerships with the lead on belonging.
Good afternoon, chair and committee members. I'm Rebecca Fletcher. I'm Commissioning Officer in Public Health and Integrated Commissioning. I'm here today to present a proposal for the Commissioning of Autism Outreach Services for the 2025-26 academic year. So we're seeking approval to commission a one-year contract up to the value of £265,000 with a specialist provider to ensure continuity of autism outreach services and support our statutory responsibilities under the Children and Families Act 2014, SEND Code of Practice and Equality Act 2010. It's probably important to note at this stage that this service has been one that's been delivered over several years already and has proven to have good outcomes for children and young people. So autism outreach has been delivered to date as part of the Autism Social Communication Education and Training Service through Rowan Special School, again with a strong impact reported and evidenced. So autism outreach is a critical early intervention service that supports mainstream pupils with special educational needs, particularly autism and social communication needs, through the delivery of neuro-affirmative education approaches such as modelling, training and coaching. This helps to promote inclusive education and belonging for those pupils within their local mainstream environment. It's proven to reduce suspensions and exclusions and prevent mainstream placement breakdown and reduce escalation to costly specialist or crisis services. So the demand for this type of support has increased significantly. So we know nationally, according to DFE statistics, that in 24-25 there were 263,989 autistic pupils, which is actually a 98% increase since 2018-19. And 75% of these students are educated within mainstream schools. The demand has been reflected and actually exceeded within local demand in Sheffield. So the asset service, as their usage has gone up 230% since 2018, with now 600 visits taking place per half term.
The current contract to support this delivery expired on the 31st of August 2025, so an urgent recommissioning is required to maintain these levels of support that have been in place. So as I mentioned, the service has made measurable improvements for pupils since delivery, and that is evidenced through 94% of children retaining their mainstream school placements 12 months post the intervention. There's been a drop in exclusions and attendance rates for these pupils, and 100% of the children who access the service rated it good or better, and 100% of staff engaged in the service with these pupils saw progress towards their outcomes. So considering the evidence need I've mentioned and the positive impact that this service has been having in Sheffield, we think a new contract is required urgently for the council to continue these services for children and young people with autism needs. I'm happy to take any questions.
I've got a comment before anybody asks a question. We're already in September, so we're already in this academic year, and now it is urgent, but we could have used another system where we could have had an extraordinary meeting so that we could have discussed this before, because clearly a contract has ended with a provider who will be waiting to find out whether or not they will be recommissioned. And I think moving forward, I don't think we can allow that to happen for our providers, because it prevents us having being trusted by providers. So that's just an observation from my part, knowing that this was to start yesterday as part of the new academic year. I think it's that's just a comment moving forward. Can we not let this happen with any commissioning stuff again? Thank you. Councillor Whittaker and Councillor Williams.
I was going to raise that issue because I thought we're already now in September, so what's happened? If we know that this works and we've got all sorts of facts and figures to know that it's doing a really good job, how come we're only funding it for it on a yearly basis? Why isn't there a sort of contract for, I don't know, 2 years or 5 years or whatever? It seems, you know, we're going to be doing it on an annual basis when they've been doing it for however many years already. So, yeah.
Yeah, so on that point, we were expecting to be able to, I suppose, do this outside of committee. We've been working with the current provider who's been delivering up until this point, so they are aware of this and this situation and us coming here. So we have worked with them round there. So I think we've managed to maintain their confidence and working with us throughout that. And we did seek legal and procurement advice throughout this, which unfortunately did change at the last minute, which is why we're sort of behind the curve on this a little bit, so sincere apologies for that. In terms of the yearly question, you're quite right to point that out. We have been doing this on a yearly basis, but actually over the last academic year we've been working with legal services to explore this in full as to what route we might take going forward. And we have come to a bit of a conclusion about the route that we might take. So there is another paper coming to you in following months to talk about that and the future direction of this, to try and make it more of a long-term commitment to that provider and to that service. But that does need linking in with, again, the wider neurodiversity work that's been talked about today. So we do plan to do that. It's actually one of my priorities as an officer, is to look at this in line with some of that neurodiversity work and how we join that up to ensure we've not got duplication across the patch with this, and then how that looks going forward with wider neurodiversity work.
And if I could just note that there's obviously a group of neurodiversity, a leadership group looking at this across the city, and at some point, you know, they're doing a lot of, we're commissioning and funding a lot of pilot work to look at what could be done differently. And then as part of that overall strategy for the city, we'll need to look at what's working well, what is it that we want to keep, and new methods of, you know, effectively and efficiently delivering our support to those children and young people who need the support with neurodiversity. And again, this will be in the mix of that, so it may well be part of a much bigger commissioning plan done at a more strategic level.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Actually, Chair, my question's been covered, thank you.
Thank you. So if we go on to the recommendations, it is that we approve the commissioning of a one-year autism outreach contract up to the value of £265,000 to an external specialist provider, continuing an existing commission. Do we all agree? Great, thank you very much. It is at this part of the meeting that we will go into closed session for item number 15, the development of our strategic partnership with Learn Sheffield. Can I just ask for some advice? Do we need to come back to members of the public afterwards, or are we just taking this?
If there's a decision that needs to be formalised.
Okay.
It's just like a motion.
Just 1 second. Yeah, so we will. So if for anybody watching, if you want to go make a cup of tea, we'll be back and then we'll give you our recommendations. Thank you. So welcome back everyone. Following on from that debate on that item, we now go to the recommendations. So the recommendation is that the committee is updated and has the opportunity to contribute to the partnership agreement between Sheffield City Council and Learn Sheffield. The committee is recommended to meet with the board of Learn Sheffield to agree the principles of the partnership agreement that is being developed. The committee is asked to note that spend on the commissions for Learn Sheffield will be more than £250,000 and potentially up to the value of £850,000. The activity is funded from DSG, which is the Direct Schools Grant. The committee is recommended to give delegated authority to Meredith Teasdale to agree the final commissions and funding envelope when negotiations with partners on SEND funding are complete. Do we all agree? That's great. Thank you very much. And I'll see you all in our next meeting tomorrow. Yeah, it's not this one, by the way, but yeah, we'll see you all again. Thank you all very much. Thanks.